The battlefield is quiet after the fight, with an exhausted hunter lying among the remains of the battle, while the survivors behind another hunter celebrate their victory. Back in the ruined city, medics are busy treating the injured, and families are hugging the people who managed to come back alive. In the middle of all this, a young boy spots Tenma Tsukishiro and happily calls him Uncle Tenma, only for Tenma to correct him right away. He'd much rather be called Big Brother, but Kyoya Hidaka still sees him as a proper hunter despite his F rank. Kyoya hasn't awakened yet, so he can't understand how Tenma ended up in this line of work when he doesn't have much talent himself. Then again, standing next to someone like Kakaru Amamiya makes the difference pretty obvious. Kakaru is an SSS rank hunter and one of the final 11, the kind of hunter whose strength makes Tenma look like an ordinary civilian. That wasn't always the world they lived in. 20 years earlier, gates began appearing across the world, and monsters started pouring out of them. Entire cities were attacked before humanity even knew how to respond. Things only changed after the system began awakening certain people and giving them powers. Those people became hunters, and they were the ones who managed to hold the monsters back. The strongest 11 eventually earned the name Final 11 and became humanity's main force against the worst threats. But there was another problem waiting for them. Demons, the strongest kind of monster, were powerful enough to challenge even the Final 11. After years of fighting, the demons kept pushing forward until the surviving humans were forced into one last stronghold. 6 members of the Final 11 were already dead, and now the rest were watching the demon army approach with nowhere else to retreat. Kakaru refuses to accept that this is where humanity's story ends. He has a way to change what happened, although it means sending someone back before the demons had even prepared their invasion. He brings out a golden hourglass known as Return Point, a unique item capable of opening a gate to a point 20 years in the past. There is only room for one person though, so whoever goes through will have to carry the responsibility of changing the entire future. Everyone already knows who should take that role. Kakaru is the strongest hunter among the Final 11, and the crowd starts calling his name. Tenma watches all of this and jokes that going back 20 years doesn't sound so bad. He turns to Kyoya and asks what the kid would want to change if he had the chance. Kyoya's answer is much more personal. He doesn't talk about becoming stronger or changing the world. He just wants his parents back. Tenma loses his smile for a moment and puts his hand on the boy's head. Around them, the survivors continue calling for Kakaru, hoping he'll accept the mission. Kakaru has been reluctant to go, but the others remind him that he's the only one who can return to the past, deal with the demons before they grow into the threat they became, and give the people here a future. Before Kakaru can make his decision, something tears through the stronghold. A massive black projectile comes down from above and heads straight toward the platform. The black-haired hunter raises a pink barrier, managing to stop the attack for a moment, but the impact is far stronger than expected. The barrier bends under the pressure and breaks, leaving the projectile to continue toward the crowd. Kyoya is caught right in its path, and when he cries out for Tenma, Tenma reacts before he even has time to think. He throws Kyoya out of the way, leaving himself underneath the attack. Kyoya hits the ground and looks back just as the projectile comes down. Tenma knows he can't escape, but instead of running, he gives Kyoya a small smile before the impact buries him. Kyoya is knocked across the platform and after getting back up, rushes toward the crater. He keeps calling for Tenma, hoping to hear anything from underneath the rubble. After a few moments, Tenma's voice finally reaches him. He's badly injured, but somehow still conscious. Kyoya calls him uncle, and even while barely able to speak, Tenma corrects him one more time. Big brother. That's when the golden gate from Return Point activates behind him. The system announces that the temporal distortion is being corrected, but there's already a problem with the process. The item needs someone to travel through the gate, and instead of selecting Kakaru, it chooses the person standing right beside it, Tenma Tsukishiro. Before anyone has a chance to react, Tenma's body is pulled into the gate and disappears. The people at the stronghold are left staring at the empty space, while Kakaru realizes that the plan has gone completely off course. The strongest hunter was supposed to return 20 years into the past, but an F-rank hunter has taken his place. The system itself detects the mistake, referring to it as a causal distortion and scheduling a correction 30 minutes later. None of that helps Tenma though, because he's already been sent back. He wakes up in a forest with no idea what to do next. The system confirms confirms that the regression worked and asks him to check his status. Tenma is 24 years old, level 2, and still F rank. There are no traits, no skills, and nothing particularly impressive about his numbers. After seeing that screen, he has little choice but to accept the situation. He really is 20 years in the past, and somehow he's the one who has been given the job of stopping the demons. Tenma is still trying to figure out how he's supposed to handle that when he hears someone screaming nearby. Tenma stays behind a tree and looks around the clearing, where several goblins carrying axes are moving through the bushes. Seeing them confirms that he's inside a gate, and knowing what's supposed to happen here doesn't make the situation any easier for him. He needs to either find the exit or finish the quest given by the system, but that sounds almost impossible when he doesn't even have a skill to fight with. To make things worse, the timer is already running. Only 24 minutes and 33 seconds are left. Before Tenma can figure out what to do, a sword suddenly flies across the clearing. The goblins barely have time to react before a series of invisible slashes cuts through them, leaving their bodies scattered across the ground. Blood even reaches the tree where Tenma is hiding. At first, Tenma thinks another hunter has entered the gate and considers asking them for help, but then a huge green warrior walks out from among the dead goblins with 2 swords covered in blood. The moment Tenma sees the warrior's cold blue eye, he realizes this isn't a hunter who came to save him. He recognizes the warrior from his memories as Shulin, a twin sword master who uses techniques from another world. More importantly, Shulin is a named monster known for killing countless hunters, and he's appeared much earlier than Tenma remembers. With Shulin now coming straight toward him, Tenma covers his face and calls for help. His voice catches the attention of a blonde hunter who enters the clearing and warns that something is killing both monsters and people. But before the hunter can understand what's going on, Shulin steps out from the bodies with both swords pointed toward them. Tenma already knows what that means, especially when the monster looks at them with a smile. Shulin charges, raising both swords at once. The blonde hunter manages to block the first slash, but the next attack is too strong, and Tenma has to tackle him out of the way. The sword cuts through the place where they were standing, hits the ground, and sends both of them flying across the clearing. They land inside the same crater, battered but still alive. Tenma doesn't waste time wondering how lucky they were. He grabs the stranger by the wrist, tells him to run, and pulls him into the trees before Shulin can reach them again. Shulin climbs out of the crater and watches them disappear into the forest, clearly intending to follow. The 2 hunters keep running until they're both struggling to breathe. Tenma wants to stop as well, but he curses his younger F-rank body for having such poor stamina and keeps moving. While running, he gets a better look at the blonde hunter and notices the crest on his shoulder. He recognizes it as the mark of the Night Crow Guild. The hunter confirms that Night Crow is the guild that claimed this gate, and then asks Tenma what he's doing here. That question reminds Tenma exactly where they are. This is the same gate involved in the infamous Night Crow Guild incident. According to the history Tenma remembers, this was supposed to be an F-rank gate, but a named monster appeared here without warning and killed everyone from the guild. Even the hunters who came later as a rescue team were wiped out. Knowing that staying here means certain death, Tenma ignores his exhaustion and focuses on escaping as quickly as possible. He asks the blonde hunter if he has a spare weapon so they can fight their way out together. The hunter opens his inventory, but before he can even finish looking for one, Shulin's sword reaches them. The blonde hunter barely has time to react before a deep slash cuts across his chest. His blood gets sprayed across Tenma's face, and their short partnership ends just like that. Tenma still has no weapon, but when Shulin attacks again, he steps onto the monster's sword and manages to stop its movement for a moment. He then grabs Shulin's wrist with both hands, trying to use his own strength to hold the monster back. It doesn't work. Shulin pulls his arm free without much effort and strikes Tenma with enough force to send him flying. Tenma crashes through one tree after another, with broken trunks falling behind him. Another impact sends him even farther until he lands beneath the branches and stops moving. One attack has already left him close to death, yet Shulin calmly walks toward him to finish the job. That's when the system window appears and announces that Deus Ex Machina will activate in 4 seconds. The countdown begins. 3, then 2. Tenma has no idea what the message means. He can only think about how ridiculous his situation is. He took Kakeru's place, traveled 20 years into the past, and now he's about to die only minutes after arriving. If this is how it ends, happens, then humanity really sent the wrong person back. The final second disappears, and Tenma's eyes fill with tears as he thinks that humanity's last chance is about to end with him. But instead of dying, Deus Ex Machina activates. The system begins making a series of corrections, and Tenma receives an X-rank trait called Talentless Adjustment. The ability increases his chance of learning skills, the growth of those skills, and every experience reward by 100,000 times. Tenma checks the number through his tears, thinking he might have misunderstood it. But it's not 100 or 1,000, it's actually 100,000. Even his current injuries trigger the skill Endurance, and the system gives him 100,000 experience for it. Level up messages begin appearing one after another, filling the screen faster than Tenma can follow. Endurance reaches its maximum level almost immediately. Tenma had gone through his entire previous life without ever learning Endurance even once. Now, its completed effect reduces the damage his body takes, enough to keep him alive after an attack that should have killed him. His ruined body starts responding again, and his hand reaches for the sword. Talentless Adjustment explains that Tenma received this ability because his complete lack of talent had caused a kind of imbalance, so causality compensated for it by giving him an absurd amount of growth potential. Tenma doesn't care about the explanation as much as what it means for him. Kyoya is still back in the future he came from, and if Tenma wants to see him again, he has to survive and change that future. He decides that he'll use every bit of this 100,000-fold advantage to become stronger and stop the demons from taking over the world. Shulin doesn't give him any time to think about it and charges again, bringing both swords down in another attack. Tenma catches the first part of the attack with his sword. The moment their weapons meet, Talentless Adjustment activates and gives him 100,000 experience for a completely new skill. Swordsmanship appears at level 1, but the level doesn't stay there for long. The experience keeps increasing while Shulin is still right in front of him, and the skill continues climbing until it reaches level 10 and is mastered. Tenma has never trained with a sword before, yet the knowledge of how to use one now comes naturally to him. He uses that new ability to counter Shulin and forces the named monster backward. Shulin slides across the clearing, leaving a trail cut into the ground, and for the first time, he starts treating the F-rank hunter as an actual opponent. Tenma checks his swordsmanship skill and confirms that it's already maxed out. He then starts thinking about what this trait really means. Other hunters either awaken with abilities or spend years developing their skills, while his ability is letting him skip that entire process. Even his grip on the sword has changed. The fundamentals that he never learned through training now feel natural in his hands. A sharp whistle suddenly catches Tenma's attention. Something is moving outside the area he can currently see. He looks around the clearing and asks where Shulin is, but before he gets an answer, the monster drops down from above with both swords ready. Shulin attacks at close range and forces Tenma down under the pressure of the strike. Their clash creates another crater in the ground, and Tenma has to endure the force while his already damaged body struggles to keep up. Endurance and swordsmanship work together as he blocks the attack and withstands the pain. Tenma pushes back with everything he has and finally breaks the clash, sending Shulin away with a counterattack. The named monster slides backward, but Tenma knows the distance won't last long. Shulin gets back up and starts laughing, clearly enjoying the fact that his target can now fight back. Tenma can still feel the difference between them though. Even with his new skills, Shulin is stronger, and simply defending himself won't be enough to win. The twin sword monster launches another attack, spinning and swinging his weapons so quickly that the movements become difficult for Tenma to follow. There are too many attacks coming one after another, and Tenma realizes that he needs to understand Shulin's movements before he can properly counter them. He focuses completely on reading the attack, and Talentless Adjustment responds by giving him another skill, Perception. It starts at level 1, but the experience once again pours into it, taking it through every level until it reaches the maximum. Tenma's vision changes as the skill develops. The movements that were too fast for him to understand are now clear. He can see Shulin, both swords, and the exact paths the weapons are going to take. Shulin puts even more power into his next attack, covering both weapons with energy before rushing toward Tenma. A blue-purple wave of power spreads through the area as he attacks, leaving Tenma with almost no obvious route to escape. But with perception at maximum, Tenma can now read the entire attack. He sees Shulin's movements and the paths of both swords as if they have slowed down. Instead of backing away, he moves into the attack. Tenma catches one of the swords at the right angle and redirects it away from himself, then follows up with a counterattack that sends Shulin flying and changes their positions. The monster crashes onto the lower ground while Tenma remains standing above the damage clearing. With max-level perception, Tenma's awareness has expanded beyond Shulin himself. He can notice the movement of the leaves, the trees, and even the small changes in the air around him. The whole battlefield has become much easier to understand. Tenma starts wondering if this is how the strongest hunters see a fight, with every movement around them clearly visible. But Shulin gets back up before he can think about it for long. The monster still has a smile on his face, and Tenma can tell that another attack is coming. This time, Shulin throws both hooked swords outward. The weapons are connected to lines, allowing him to pull them back and swing them around from opposite directions. The two blades begin rotating through the clearing, creating huge intersecting circles that cover almost all of the open space around Tenma. He raises his sword and tries to stop the crossing attack, but the blades curve around his guard. Tenma twists away from one, only for the other to come toward him from another direction. The attacks continue moving around him, leaving black trails that seem to surround him from every side. Blocking all of them isn't possible, so Tenma has no choice but to move away. As he takes a step backward, Talentless Adjustment activates again and gives him another skill, Footwork. The skill starts at level 1, but the experience immediately carries it through the levels until it reaches its maximum. Tenma's movement changes at once. His body now knows how to move and shift its weight properly, even though he has never trained in footwork before. He takes a step back and ends up much farther away than he expected, clearing Shulin's blades by a huge distance. Even Tenma didn't intend to move that far. Across the clearing, Shulin tightens his grip on the twin swords and remains focused on him. Tenma steadies the borrowed weapon and prepares for the next exchange. With swordsmanship and footwork now working together, his body naturally settles into a proper fighting stance. For the first time since entering the gate, Tenma feels like he might actually be able to win. He pushes forward and meets Kukulin head-on, bringing his sword against the monster's crossed blades at close range. The clash sends both of them moving across the clearing, and their swords keep meeting so quickly that the attacks turn into flashes of white. Kukulin seems to enjoy the fight now that his opponent can keep up, while Tenma gives him a tired grin and asks what he thinks of his new and improved opponent. Thanks to his max-level footwork, Tenma can stay close to him, following every change in direction, strike, and kick. Another clash sends out a shockwave that tears through the plants around them, but neither side backs down. Tenma keeps moving with the fight instead of getting pushed away, and when he catches another opening, his counter throws Kukulin off his rhythm. Their battle then moves into the air, with both of them exchanging attacks while the pressure from their clash spreads outward and covers the clearing. The force is so strong that even the gate itself shakes from the impact. Outside the gate, a blonde woman is waiting with her phone in hand. She's Yuna Shirigan, a C-rank hunter from the Hunter Association, and she isn't exactly pleased about being sent to rescue people who managed to get trapped inside an F-rank gate. From her point of view, only an idiot could get stuck in a gate that weak. The Nightcrow Guild has already passed the time limit for clearing the gate, though, so the association has assigned her to check on them. Her communication with the association remains connected as she prepares to enter, and a small system window confirms that the rescue operation is starting. Since Nightcrow is an average beginner guild and should have finished an F-rank gate without any trouble, Yuna assumes they are probably taking their time somewhere instead of doing their job. She raises her hand and uses her level 2 spatial teleportation, going straight through the blue portal. Yuna lands inside the gate and immediately realizes that her guess was completely wrong. Blood, bodies, and broken trees cover the area around the entrance, and the destruction stretches much farther into the forest. She looks around and wonders how a group of beginners managed to cause this much damage. Yuna calls out to the Nightcrow members and asks if anyone can hear her, but nobody answers. She starts moving deeper into the gate, looking for any sign of survivors, and that's when the size of the destruction becomes clear. Huge craters cover the ground, trees have been broken apart, and the damage is far beyond what an ordinary F-rank battle should be able to cause. Something much stronger than the monsters she expected is obviously here. Then Yuna spots two figures in the distance. One is the green monster, still holding his blood-covered twin swords. The other is Tenma, who is badly injured but somehow still standing with the borrowed sword in his hand. Even from where she is, Yuna can feel the pressure coming from the monster. She stops in her tracks because the aura alone is enough to make a C-rank hunter feel uneasy. There's no way an ordinary goblin could have that kind of presence. The two opponents continue watching each other through the dust, and then the monster speaks. Not only does he speak human language, but he formally introduces himself as a Kukulin. Yuna is even more surprised when he acknowledges the destruction caused by their fight and tells Tenma that he'll repay him someday. Black smoke then begins gathering around Kukulin, and Tenma rushes forward, trying to land one final attack before the monster disappears. But when the smoke clears, Kukulin is gone. Yuna walks through the dust and immediately starts demanding an explanation for what she just witnessed. Tenma tries to answer, but his body chooses that moment to give out. The strength keeping him on his feet runs out, and he collapses in front of her. Yuna catches up to him and checks whether he's still conscious. She introduces herself as a rescue hunter from the association and can't believe the condition he's in. No F-rank hunter should have survived wounds like these. Tenma is still confused and keeps thinking about the talking monster instead of answering her questions, so Yuna tells him to focus and asks again what happened. Tenma eventually looks at her and, after a long pause, introduces himself as the person who saved her life. Yuna doesn't even have time to react before Tenma tells her not to forget it. He then tries to take one heroic step forward, only for his body to give up and send him straight back to the ground. Later, Yuna stands among the bodies of the Night Crow members, all of them covered up after the incident. Looking at the scene, she has no idea how she's supposed to write a report explaining what happened here. Meanwhile, Tenma wakes up in a hospital with bandages covering his body. For a moment, he doesn't know where he is or how long he's been unconscious. He pulls back the curtain around his bed and looks through the quiet ward. Seeing other injured patients around him makes it clear that he managed to escape the gate and return to the normal world. Tenma then opens his blue status window and, seeing the information there, leaves him with no choice but to accept that the regression wasn't some strange dream. In his previous life, Tenma reached level 6 without learning even a single skill. This time, after only one battle, he already has several skills at maximum level. His main status is still as unimpressive as ever, 24 years old, level 2, and F rank. But the difference is the new trait, Talentless Adjustment. That one ability allowed him to fight Kukulayan, despite the massive difference between them. Tenma checks the trait again and notices that there's a special effect listed below the experience multiplier, but it's locked. Naturally, he wants to know what it does. The visible part of the trait already explains that the 100,000 times experience bonus is basically the system's way of compensating for his complete lack of talent. Tenma starts wondering what would have happened if Kakaru had been the one to regress instead. Would he have received all the abilities of the final 11? Probably not. Someone who was already extremely talented from the moment they awakened wouldn't need a correction like this. Tenma stops thinking about it and reminds himself that Kakaru isn't the one who came back. He is. His thoughts are interrupted when Yuna walks into the room and notices that he's awake. The doctors had expected Tenmei to remain unconscious for at least another week, so she wasn't expecting him to recover this quickly. That makes Tenma wonder about his own healing since he doesn't remember having any recovery skill. The system gives him the answer by showing that he has natural recovery at maximum level, which allows his body to heal much faster. Apparently, even recovering while unconscious counted as training, giving Talentless Adjustment another chance to work. Yuna, meanwhile, is getting annoyed because Tenma keeps ignoring her while she tries to talk to him. He eventually asks who she is, which earns him an irritated reminder that they already met inside the gate. She introduces herself properly as Yuna Shirigan, a C-rank Hunter Association member and the person who carried him out after he collapsed. Hearing her name brings Tenma's memories of the gate back. He remembers Kukulin and the Night Crow incident, and he also remembers what was supposed to happen afterward. In the original timeline, the same name monster would have killed the Association hunters who came to investigate the incident. Yuna asks Tenma if the story he told her about what happened inside the gate is actually true. Tenma looks at her, knowing exactly how unbelievable it sounds, and lets her explain what she already thinks happened. One of the Night Crow members who survived the incident backs up Tenma's story and confirms that the monster inside the gate was an unusually powerful goblin named Kukulin. For Tenma, that testimony is important for another reason. It proves that the future has already started changing. Yuna explains that the survivor's statement is also why the association is having trouble with the official report. They don't want to believe that an F-rank hunter managed to defeat a monster like Kukulin, even with a witness saying otherwise. Tenma isn't interested in the recognition anyway, so he gets ready to leave the hospital. Yuna follows him and can't understand why he'd turn down the chance to become famous after an incident like this. Tenma knows that getting too much attention right now would be a problem. Demons will eventually start appearing through the gates and take control of the world, and Kukulin showing up much earlier than he should have is a warning that something is already different. There could be demons or their agents watching for people who interfere with the future. Because of that, Tenma decides that keeping a low profile is much safer. Before he can get away, Yuna manages to stop him long enough to ask one more thing. Why did he even enter Night Crow's gate in the first place? Tenma gives her the least impressive answer he can think of. He says he went inside because he wanted money and planned to take the mana stones that Night Crow had left behind. Yuna looks at him like she can't figure out what kind of person she's dealing with, which is exactly what Tenma wants. If people think he's just a strange, greedy F-rank hunter, they'll have no reason to pay attention to him. He leaves Yuna behind and disappears into the crowd outside. The city around him is still perfectly normal. Advertisements play from the buildings, people complain about small everyday problems, and students walk around together without having any idea what their world is going to become. Tenma knows this period of history very differently. To everyone else, it's just another ordinary day, but he remembers that this same world will eventually be destroyed by the demons. Every normal scene in front of him feels like something that he's been given another chance to protect. He makes his way back to the old apartment building he remembers and unlocks his door. Inside, everything is just as he left it in his memories. There are no monsters, no destroyed cities, and no constant warnings from the system. Tenma sits down on the couch and lets his tired body rest while the memories of his previous life start coming back to him. After everything he's seen, one question keeps bothering him. How is an F-rank hunter supposed to save humanity? In the original timeline, the association would soon send its hunters to investigate what happened at Night Crow's gate. But this time, Tenma has already dealt with Kukulin himself, which means that entire event has changed. He starts going through everything he knows about the regression and comes to the conclusion that the timeline began changing the moment talentless adjustment appeared. The future he remembers is no longer guaranteed to happen, but only Tenma remembers what that future looked like. That gives him one clear goal. He needs to become strong enough to deal with every major incident before it leads to the demons taking over the world. Fortunately, Tenma spent most of his first life reading hunter magazines and keeping up with important events, so he has a rough idea of what is coming. The problem is that 20 years of fighting, surviving, and watching people die has blurred a lot of the smaller details. Dates, names, and other information that once seemed obvious are difficult to remember now. That's when Tenma thinks about perception. If one skill can improve his senses to this level, maybe another skill could help him recover the memories he's lost. He decides to test the idea by trying to force himself into learning something that requires serious mental effort. For his experiment, Tenma picks up a textbook about quantum mechanics. He figures that if he studies something complicated enough, the system might recognize the effort and give him an intellectual skill. Unfortunately, the plan immediately reminds him that there's a reason he never studied this stuff before. After going through several pages, he eventually drops onto the book and admits that he hasn't understood a single thing. Tenma is ready to give up on the whole experiment, but then the system finally finally reacts. It recognizes the amount of mental effort he has put in and gives him a new skill called intelligence. As usual, talentless adjustment starts feeding it the experience, and the skill moves through its levels until it reaches maximum. Tenma laughs when he realizes that his ridiculous idea actually worked. He checks what intelligence does and finds that it improves things such as magical control, power, and mana. That's useful, but it isn't what he was hoping for. He then gets another idea. If intelligence can be combined with his max level perception, perhaps he can use both abilities to search through the parts of his memory that he can no longer reach. Tenma sits down, clears his mind, and focuses entirely on his previous life. He activates both skills and gives himself one simple goal: remember everything that happened in the future. Memories begin returning one after another, starting with Nightcrow and Yuna, then moving through Kikaru, the demons, the battles, and eventually the final stronghold where humanity was making its last stand. Years of memories that had been buried behind his 20 years of suffering start coming back. The system responds by giving him another skill, memory search, and the same ridiculous experience multiplier takes it from level 1 all the way to level 10. At maximum level, the skill can search through memories hidden deep inside his subconscious. The amount of information coming back at once leaves Tenma shaking, but when the process settles down, he realizes that everything is there again. The memories of both lives are finally organized in his mind. Tenma decides to test his new memory by trying to remember about the details of his old bank account, manages to recall the forgotten information, and uses the password to access his phone. Later, he goes to the bank and checks the account. The result is 2,782 yen. His memory may now be perfect, but his bank balance is still that of an F-rank hunter. Tenma uses some of it to buy the cheapest drink he can find at a cafe and takes a long sip outside. The drink doesn't solve his money problems, but sitting there under the normal afternoon sky still feels strange to him. After spending so long in a ruined world, simply being able to sit outside without worrying about monsters makes him appreciate how different this time is. But Tenma doesn't let himself relax for long. He has already decided what he needs to do. There are demons hiding somewhere in this peaceful city, and he needs to find them before they have enough time to grow stronger. His first target is known as the Growth Demon, the first demon that humanity will ever discover. Tenma is about to start looking for it when his phone rings. The caller is Hiroki Gondo. The moment he sees the name, memory search starts bringing up information connected to it, although Tenma still answers cautiously and asks who is calling. Hiroki answers the phone with an insult, then tells Tenma that the team is already inside mining mana stones. He orders him to get to a gate in Sakyo, Shichijo City right away. Tenma's restored memories fill in the reason. As an F-rank hunter, he makes money by taking empty spots in raids whenever a team is short on people. The others usually get impatient with him and tell him to hurry up, but refusing the work also means losing the money. Tenma tries to turn Hiroki down this time, pointing out that he can't even afford a taxi. He gets up from the cafe while Hiroki keeps arguing with him over the phone, only for a taxi to show up a moment later. Apparently, someone has already taken care of the transportation problem without bothering to ask him. During the ride, Tenma checks his status and smiles at Hiroki's reaction after he hangs up on him. Looking through his collection of max-level skills, he feels like he finally has a chance to see what his new body can actually do. The taxi takes him out of the city and toward the mountains where the assigned gate is located. A group of hunters is already waiting there in front of a black portal that keeps rotating in place. Tenma looks over the party and realizes that even a simple raid like this can give him plenty of chances to test his new abilities. Before he can do much, a green-haired man starts complaining about his late arrival. His name is Kuki Kazama, a D-rank hunter and the master of the Kusei Guild. Kuki accuses Tenma of putting their completion bonus at risk by showing up late. When Kuki confronts him, Tenma simply looks at him, but his expression comes across as threatening enough for the system to give him a new skill called Intimidation. The skill lowers an enemy's readiness to fight, but it only works on targets at Tenma's rank or lower. Since Kuki is D rank while Tenma is only F rank, he doesn't receive any experience from using it against him. Tenma doesn't bother arguing and instead asks for a usable weapon. Kuki tells a white-haired guild member to give him any spare equipment they have. The guild master then leads the group through the portal, while two of the members quietly talk about how strangely nervous he seems. Once they enter the gate, Kuki proves why he's the one leading the raid by killing a goblin with a single heavy attack. The group then spreads out as they move deeper into a dark cave. The first area is already filled with dead monsters from the easy opening fight. A white-haired hunter tells Tenma to stop falling behind and deal with the bodies. Tenma follows the order and works beside a brown-haired porter, keeping up the image of an obedient F rank while paying close attention to how the others handle the corpses. He takes a borrowed knife and uses it on one of the goblins, hoping that harvesting the monster might trigger another skill. The porter is dismantling another corpse nearby, and Tenma watches his movements instead of focusing on the materials themselves. He then asks the porter for another dagger. The worker is surprised by the request, but hands one over, unknowingly giving Tenma exactly what he needs for his next experiment. Using perception, Tenma copies the process and starts cutting into the creature with movements far more precise than anything an inexperienced hunter should know. The porter watches him in disbelief as Tenma works. Once he collects the material, the system gives him the butchering skill, and the 100,000 times experience boost starts pushing it through its levels. Before long, the skill reaches maximum proficiency. Tenma finishes the goblin with a perfectly prepared piece of monster meat, leaving the brown-haired porter staring at the result without knowing what to say. Tenma simply checks his work and suggests that they catch up with the others. Deeper inside the cave, the ground is covered with the bodies of goblins and demon wolves killed by the main party. Kuki and the others stop for a moment to decide which materials are worth collecting. The white-haired hunter tells everyone to keep moving, while the porter argues that they should gather more of the loot. While they're talking, Tenma takes a large demon wolf and processes its body in a single smooth movement. His maxed butchering skill produces an undamaged F-rank demon wolf pelt, preserving its full value. Another system notification then gives him a set of premium F-rank fangs. The party continues deeper into the cave, leaving behind only bodies that Tenma has already cleaned properly. The porter comments that the raid is going unusually well and says the earlier delays were probably caused by Tsukishiro's slow pace. He then asks how Tenma suddenly became so fast and skilled overnight. Before Tenma can answer, a goblin carrying a dagger appears from the tunnel ahead. It notices the two hunters who have become separated from the main group and lets out a growl. Tenma realizes that one monster must have escaped the first sweep and remained here to guard this section. His memories give him an even more useful piece of information. He knows this is the exact point where an ambush is supposed to happen. The porter notices more movement in the darkness and warns Tenma that they're in trouble. He can't believe their only fighter is an F rank with no talent, someone who shouldn't even be able to kill a single goblin. The monster's expression almost seems to agree with him. It raises one hand and signals toward the shadows, revealing 4 more goblins. What had looked like a simple gathering job has now turned into 5 monsters against 2 hunters. The porter is already convinced they're finished. Their leader charges toward Tenma with its dagger raised, while the other goblins follow behind it. Tenma activates intimidation, and red light appears in his eyes. This time, the skill has targets it can actually affect. A heavy black pressure spreads through the passage, stopping the goblin's momentum. The confidence disappears from the leader's face before it can complete its attack. Since all 5 enemies are within Tenma's rank, intimidation starts receiving the multiplied experience from each one affected. Its level quickly climbs, reaching level 5 as one frightened goblin drops its weapon and collapses. The fear spreads through the rest of the group, and each goblin that falls gives the skill more experience. Soon, only their captain is still standing. The other 4 are unconscious on the ground with their weapons scattered around them. The goblin captain's legs shake, but it refuses to give up and forces itself to growl at Tenma. Tenma quietly admits that even a skill with such strict conditions is surprisingly useful. Then he hears a noise behind him and turns around to check on the porter. The man has already fainted from fear and missed the entire thing. With nobody awake to see what really happened, Tenma decides to use the situation for another experiment. He combines intelligence and agility, while the goblin captain raises its dagger again. Using the increased speed and analysis from his skills, Tenma moves through a series of cuts that the goblin struggles to follow. He tells the captain that he's only doing a small experiment, while the creature can barely keep track of him. A rapid series of red strikes fills the tunnel, leaving the goblin badly wounded and exhausted, but it somehow remains standing with the help of its weapon. Tenma had hoped that fighting an opponent like this would be enough to make him learn an advanced technique, but he discovers that the system still has one limitation. Talentless adjustment can make learning and growth happen far faster, but it can't completely remove the lack of talent that the ability was created to compensate for. Tenma clicks his tongue when he realizes that even his ridiculous cheat-like ability comes with some fine print. With a single counterattack that cuts the monster apart, the moment the kill is registered, the experience reward is multiplied by talentless adjustment. 100,000 times the normal experience pours into Tenma's status, and level up messages start appearing one after another. He had been level 2 just moments ago, but the experience pushes him all the way to level 20. Tenma stares at the number, then realizes something strange. Killing Kukulin had given him no experience because the monster escaped, while this one goblin captain was enough to take him from level 2 to 20. The system then explains that level 20 is currently locked. To go any higher, Tenma has to complete an awakening quest. These quests appear every 20 levels and act as a limit on his normal progression. Any experience he earns beyond the current level cap is converted into points instead. His level and rank remain frozen until the quest is cleared, while those accumulated points can be spent in the system shop. Tenma now has a separate way to make use of any excess experience. A red notification suddenly appears around his hands, making Tenma recoil at the system's overly aggressive way of explaining things. Since the awakening quest hasn't appeared yet, he decides not to worry about the trial or the shop for now. His first priority is dealing with the unconscious porter. Tenma wakes him up and tells him that they need to butcher the monsters before leaving. The porter slowly comes around and tries to remember what happened during the ambush. Then he notices the 5 goblins lying around the tunnel and nearly panics again. He recognizes the captain and the other goblins that had surrounded them, so Tenma quickly gives him a simple explanation. He claims that some unknown third person must have killed them. The porter accepts the story without much resistance, especially once he realizes that there are valuable materials to collect. The 2 hunters start processing the bodies together. While the porter concentrates on the corpses, Tenma secretly opens his status window again. He goes through the changes caused by his sudden jump in levels. Underneath his F-rank profile is now a growing list of skills, most of which have already reached level 10. But the most important thing is the level displayed on his main profile. 20 is clearly locked, and the awakening quest still hasn't appeared. Tenma decides that he'll continue training and searching for demons while waiting for it. Another red system window appears before he can move on. It tells him that he has reached the absolute limit of F-rank and warns that his upcoming awakening quest will be more difficult. It also mentions an additional reward, but doesn't explain what it is. Tenma looks at the message and wonders what kind of problem the system is preparing for him. Even without knowing the details, the warning doesn't sound reassuring. Nearby, the porter has recovered enough to watch Tenma silently kneeling among a pile of goblin corpses. From the way he's looking at him, Tenma seems like someone with a very strange interest in dead bodies. The porter obviously has no idea what Tenma is actually doing. The system finally reveals the important part. Talentless adjustment is going to evolve through a limit break. This isn't an ordinary awakening quest. The reward could completely change the way Tenma grows. The level cap of every skill will increase by 1. The amount of statistics he receives whenever he levels up will be multiplied by 1.2, and a new shop of causality reversal will become available. On top of all that, Tenma will be promoted from F rank to D rank. The requirements are much harder than the rewards. He has only 3 days to defeat a demon inside a designated gate. Tenma already has a good idea which demon the system is referring to. If the history he remembers remembers is still close enough to the original timeline. His target should be the growth demon, one of the demons that will eventually become a major threat to humanity. A smaller blue system window appears with another reward before Tenma can think much further about it. The porter asks whether he's leaving, and Tenma confirms that he's heading out. Since talentless adjustment includes quest-related equipment, the system gives him a special rare weapon chest. Before leaving the gate, Tenma opens it to see what kind of weapon he has received. White light spreads around him as the reward appears, and a long silver sword forms in his hand. It replaces the basic steel weapon he borrowed from the guild with something that belongs to him. The system identifies it as Soul Predator, a special rare sword connected to his quest. By sunset, the raid party returns through the portal carrying the materials they collected, and nobody else has died. The porter says goodbye to Kuki, who acknowledges the work they did and dismisses him. The other members also wave as everyone goes their separate ways, looking much happier with Tenma now than they had at the beginning of the raid. As Tenma walks away with his new sword and a 3-day deadline hanging over him, another thought comes to mind. Kyoya should be only 6 years old in this period. Tenma checks his account and notices that Kuki has transferred 50,000 yen to him for the raid. He was expecting only 35,000, so he wonders whether the guild made a mistake. Kuki explains that the agency fee was handled separately and that he added a bonus because Tenma's work helped the raid go smoothly. He thanks Tenma, says he'll contact him again for future work, and leaves with the rest of the guild members. Tenma thinks about how strange the situation is. The world is still heading toward disaster, but even this small amount of new strength has already changed how people treat him. Then his stomach reminds him of something much more basic. Regression didn't give him any way to ignore hunger. With money in his account, Tenma decides to eat before dealing with the demons or trying to find his family. Just then, Hiroki sends him another 4,500 yen and proudly explains that he has deducted the taxi fare. Tenma immediately curses him, thinking that their friendship apparently comes with its own system of hostile deductions. Later that night, Tenma walks into a brightly lit supermarket to spend some of his newly earned money. While looking around, he notices a display of fresh broccoli and stops in front of it. He takes in the smell as if he's looking at something incredibly valuable. In the future, the apocalypse destroyed agriculture and supply chains, making ordinary fresh vegetables extremely difficult to obtain. Something as simple as broccoli had become a luxury. Tenma is still appreciating the vegetables when someone approaches him. It's Yuna Shirogane. She's wearing glasses and casual clothes instead of her usual association uniform. Yuna asks whether someone has assigned Tenma to follow her, but he tells her that he's only there to buy groceries. Yuna decides that this strange man probably needs to be watched. Then she looks at him again, and something about him seems familiar for a reason that has nothing to do with their meeting inside the dungeon. Tenma's memory search responds to the connection and brings back the relevant memory from his subconscious. In the memory, Yuna is standing behind a pale woman with silver hair, and Tenma recognizes her right away. He carefully asks Yuna if she has an older sister named Yuki Shirigan. Yuna immediately becomes suspicious and asks how someone she barely knows could possibly know about her sister. Tenma already knows the answer because of his restored memories. Yuki is destined to become the Infinite Archer, one of the final 11. In the future, humanity will see her as one of its greatest hopes, surrounded by an endless rain of arrows. But she will also become known as the Goblin Slayer, after goblins kill her younger sister in the original future. Tenma realizes that the younger sister is Yuna herself. Since Yuna survived the Night Crow incident this time, Yuki's future has already started changing. Of course, Tenma can't tell Yuna any of that, so he gives her a much simpler explanation. He says he remembers Yuki because she's beautiful, then adds that the two sisters look alike. Yuna takes that the wrong way and starts thinking that Tenma is trying to flirt with her in the most awkward way possible. Tenma's actual reason for asking about Yuki is completely different. He's interested in astral movement, the technique Yuki will eventually use, and he thinks it might help him deal with the growth demon. Because of that, he asks Yuna for her phone number. That only makes her more suspicious. So Tenma quickly explains that he's not trying to pursue her and only wants to ask her about a few things. He then reminds her that she owes him for saving her life, leaving Yuna with very little room to refuse. She finally gives him her phone, and the two exchange their contact information right there fire beside the vegetables. Yuna types his number into her phone while looking annoyed enough to have an imaginary flame burning behind her. Tenma saves her contact and quietly feels satisfied about gaining a useful connection. Yuna then walks away, clearly irritated by the whole situation, while Tenma wisely lets her leave without following. The next morning, Tenma is waiting at a city bus stop because he already has another problem to solve. He needs stronger combat abilities. While waiting, he summons the sword he received the previous day and takes another look at it. Soul Predator turns out to be a super rare weapon with 30 attack power, and it has hidden functions that can be unlocked by devouring souls. Even with a weapon like that, Tenma knows he can't simply rely on equipment to defeat the growth demon. He needs a technique strong enough to actually hurt it. His reasoning is simple. If you want to learn cooking, you find a cook. So if he wants to learn sword techniques, he should find someone who knows the sword better than anyone else. That leads him to the Kirishima Dojo in Akihabara, a sword school whose name he remembers from his previous life. Tenma enters after politely announcing himself. The entrance is open, so he follows the quiet corridor farther inside. While walking, he thinks about the task ahead. Defeating a demon like the growth demon will require a powerful attack that can deal a huge amount of damage in one decisive strike. The person living in this dojo is exactly the kind of swordsman he needs. In the future, this man will be able to cut through mountains and split the sky with a single swing. People who survived the apocalypse considered his strength almost miraculous, and he would become one of the people who gave humanity hope during its darkest period. His name is Taiyu Kirishima, the Sword Saint and one of the strongest warriors of the ruined future. But the Taiyu living in the present doesn't look much like the legendary swordsman Tenma remembers. Instead, he's complaining about having another visitor this early in the morning. A barefoot figure stops in front of Tenma inside the dim reception room. The blue-haired swordsman walks toward him with the confidence of someone who thinks he's already famous. And before Tenma can even explain why he's there, Taiyu starts scattering autograph sheets around him. He yawns and assumes Tenma is simply another fan who came to see him. Then he asks whether Tenma is a fan and prepares his pen, asking where he should sign. Tenma's memory search instead brings up the image of the future Taiyu. His sword releases an overwhelming radiance, and with one perfectly controlled draw, the blade cuts through both mountain and sky. The power of that single strike is enough to leave the entire battlefield divided behind him. There is no question that the future Sword Saint is incredibly powerful. His personality, however, is another matter. The present Taiyu laughs and assumes Tenma is too impressed to even speak because he's standing in front of his idol. He even confidently declares that he will save the world, despite the fact that fate hasn't given him that role yet. Tenma compares this version of Taiyu with the legendary swordsman he remembers and decides that the current one is somehow even worse than the rumors. There's also something strange about Taiyu's future. Not long after becoming famous as the Sword Saint, he dies for a reason that nobody ever manages to discover. For now, though, Taiyu is still completely convinced that Tenma is a fan and even offers to sign his back. Tenma ignores the misunderstanding and politely asks him for sword training instead. That finally catches Taiyu off guard. The moment he hears the word disciple, his attitude changes completely, and he complains that Tenma should have said that from the beginning. The two eventually sit among piles of autograph sheets, making the dojo look more like a fan club storage room than a traditional sword school. Taiyu admits that he spent the past month doing little more than thinking about autographs and signatures. He has registered as a hunter, but hasn't accepted a single mission yet. Then he becomes suspicious and asks Tenma how he even found him. Taiyu leans closer, watching him carefully. Tenma can't exactly explain that he remembers this man's entire future, so he stays quiet. Fortunately, Taiyu comes up with his own explanation. According to him, Tenma must have watched his measurement exam, seen his sword technique, and fallen in love with him. Taiyu laughed at his own assumption, completely convinced that Tenma had come to see him because he was a fan. Tenma simply went along with it, introduced himself as another hunter, and asked what kind of skill Taiyu would recommend learning. His memory search brought back a scene from the future, when a drunk Taiyu had once answered that same question. According to him, the technique was simple, useful for everyone, and formed the basis of swordsmanship. Tenma had no idea what he was talking about, which had left Taiyu struggling struggling to understand how someone could be so unfamiliar with such a basic move. The technique was called straight line slash, the most basic attack beneath even Taiyu's overwhelming swordsmanship. Back in the dojo, Tenma asked to learn straight line slash, and Taiyu agreed. He took a wooden training sword from the wall and handed it to Tenma, telling him to show how he held it. But before Tenma could even properly grip the sword, Taiyu took it back and declared that he had no talent. Tenma pointed out that he hadn't even gotten the chance to use the sword, but Taiyu seemed to think he had already seen enough. Tenma refused to accept that judgment and argued that there was no way to know his ability without actually watching him try. Taiyu sighed at his persistence. He had apparently finished his talent assessment before the lesson had even started. Eventually, Taiyu handed the wooden sword back and gave Tenma one chance. He watched closely as Tenma wrapped his hand around the hilt. The moment he held the weapon, his max-level swordsmanship took over. His body naturally moved into a proper stance despite never having trained before. Tenma looked at Taiyu and calmly asked if he still thought he had no talent. Taiyu had nothing to say. Whatever Tenma had been doing before, his posture had completely changed once the sword was in his hand. The sight clearly bothered Taiyu, so he told Tenma to follow him. They left the dojo and went to a wooded hill overlooking the city. Taiyu took his position and said he would show Tenma the technique first. Straight line slash was technically still an incomplete level 0 skill, but Taiyu jokingly called his demonstration special fan service. He raised the wooden sword high above his head and brought it straight down. A powerful wave spread across the area, and every wooden post in front of him broke apart. Taiyu turned back, lifted the training sword again, and told Tenma to try it himself. From his expression, it was clear that he now wanted to see how long this supposedly talentless student could keep going. Tenma copied the stance and used everything his max-level swordsmanship could tell him. His first strike hit the post hard, but it didn't come close to Taiyu's result. Taiyu returned to his earlier opinion. Apparently, even max-level swordsmanship wasn't enough to teach Tenma this particular technique. Tenma tried again and again, but every swing simply battered the wood instead of cutting through it. Taiyu estimated that at this rate, Tenma would need about 10 years just to learn such a basic attack. When Tenma asked for some actual advice, Taiyu said that anyone who wasn't a fan would probably have given up already. Still, he explained what Tenma was doing wrong. When raising the sword, he needed to connect the blade with heaven, and when bringing it down, he had to imagine heaven and earth joining along one perfectly straight line. The explanation sounded strange, but Tenma accepted it and kept practicing. He continued bringing the sword down, changing the path slightly with every attempt. After watching him repeat the same movement over and over, Taiyu decided that there was no point continuing and suggested they stop. But before he could finish, Tenma made another strike. The sound was different this time, and Taiyu's attention immediately returned to him. The wooden sword had traveled along a much cleaner path, carrying more force than before. Taiyu watched the next few attempts and couldn't understand what he was seeing. Each swing was getting sharper. Then one strike cut deep into the thick wooden target before the force continued into the nearby posts and broke them apart. Tenma lowered the wooden sword while standing among the scattered pieces. The 10-year estimate had been reduced to a few hours. Taiyu struggled to deal with what had just happened, then found another way to raise the difficulty. Cutting one post was no longer enough. He told Tenma to cut 4 logs lined up together with one attack. Taiyu clearly expected him to fail and presented the challenge as if he were generously allowing Tenma one more chance. Tenma gave him a confused look, but walked toward the 4 targets anyway. He tightened his grip and raised the wooden sword into the same position, connecting the blade with heaven. Taiyu was already starting to rethink his earlier judgment. Tenma brought the sword down in one straight vertical motion. The blade passed through all 4 targets, and the posts exploded apart. At that moment, the system recognized the technique as level 1 straight line slash. Talentless adjustment multiplied the experience reward by 100,000 and officially added the skill to Tenma's status. Taiyu fell backward, completely unable to believe what he had just witnessed. His new disciple simply stood there with a small, satisfied smile. That evening, the scene shifted to the Shirogane sisters' apartment. Blue spatial energy appeared above the building, and Yuna teleported inside while carrying grocery bags. She announced that she was home, but Yuki immediately scolded her for using her spatial ability so casually inside the apartment. If she wasted her power like that, she might not have enough left when an actual emergency happened. Yuna brushed off the warning, but Yuki soon noticed that her younger younger sister's face looked unusually flushed. Yuki asked what was wrong, but Yuna denied anything had happened and tried to change the subject. She adjusted her glasses and then asked whether Yuki knew a hunter named Tenma Tsukishiro. Yuki didn't recognize the name. However, the thoughtful smile on her face made Yuna feel as though the question itself had already given something away. Yuna accepted the answer awkwardly and started wondering whether she had eaten something strange. Later that night, Yuna lay on her bed hugging a pillow while thinking about what had happened at the supermarket. She began wondering if Tenma had brought up Yuki on purpose just so he could get her phone number. And, although she didn't really want to admit it, she also had to acknowledge that the strange man wasn't unattractive. That thought only made her face heat up even more. Yuki leaned toward Yuna and asked if there was someone she had met recently. Yuna's reaction was enough to answer before she even said anything, and Yuki pointed out how easy she was to read. She sat down beside her and asked about the man. Yuna explained that he was the hunter who had helped her before, but said there wasn't really anything to tell since all he had done was ask for her contact information. Yuki accepted that answer and told her that if things ever became more serious, she should introduce him. Yuna reluctantly agreed. She then mentioned that she would be away for several days because she had to take part in a large guild raid, especially since the gates had started behaving strangely. Yuki warned her to be careful with dangerous association assignments, which earned the usual complaint from Yuna about her sister worrying too much. After Yuki left the bedroom and closed the door, Yuna reached underneath her pillow and pulled out her phone. She opened Tenma's contact, despite having just insisted that there was nothing going on between them. Elsewhere, Tenma continued practicing on the hill. The repeated sword strikes had left the training post broken into pieces, and the system informed him that the technique he had been practicing had reached its maximum level of 10. Tenma was worn out, but he was satisfied. Understanding the movement had taken some effort, though once he figured it out, mastering it had been much easier. He thanked Taiyu and prepared to leave. Before he could go, Taiyu called him back and asked for one more favor. The swordsman had dropped to his knees and was practically begging Tenma to show the technique again. He couldn't accept what he had seen. Tenma had reached level 10 in a matter of minutes, while Taiyu himself, despite being the technique's creator, had never reached that level. Tenma couldn't help wondering if he had already become stronger than the person who was supposed to be his teacher. The system identified the technique as Kurashima style, single flash slash, a rare level 10 skill capable of cutting things that normally could not be cut. With the growth demon expected to appear the following day, Tenma wanted to learn every sword technique that could help him. He agreed to show Taiyu the completed technique, then properly introduced himself and held out his hand, making their arrangement official. Taiyu's eyes filled with tears. He rushed forward, hugged Tenma, and called him master. From that moment, he decided that Tenma was his teacher. In exchange, Taiyu promised to teach him every technique of the Kurashima style. He eventually let go after Tenma agreed to the deal. Taiyu then began showing Tenma another technique. He jumped high into the air, drew his sword, and performed the 12th form of Kurashima style, explosive asura slash. He came down in a fiery attack that tore through the hillside. After landing, Taiyu happily asked Tenma whether he understood the technique. Tenma was breathing heavily, and his reaction made the answer obvious. This move was nothing like single flash slash. He couldn't reproduce it, nor could he understand the principles behind it. Talentless adjustment could make learning much faster, but it couldn't simply erase the lack of talent that the ability was meant to compensate for. Natural recovery activated as Tenma's exhausted body began restoring itself. Taiyu suggested that they stop there, but Tenma had one thing to say before they parted. He told Taiyu that he was looking forward to seeing him master single flash slash himself. Those words changed something in Taiyu. Until then, he had obtained his hunter license, but had never accepted a mission because he had no intention of seriously working as a hunter. Meeting Tenma changed his mind. Now, he wanted to become a real hunter and put his sword to use. The next day, Tenma went to a shop that dealt with monster materials. The craftsman examined the wolf hide and fangs Tenma had brought and praised how well they had been preserved. He asked if Tenma knew how to dismantle monsters, then explained that properly processed materials were important for his business. The better the material, the stronger the secondary effects that could be added to equipment. He offered Tenma a good price and told him to bring any high-quality materials to him in the future. Tenma looked over an ordinary F- leather armor set that provided 6 additional defense. Even equipment this basic could make a difference when survival came down to a small amount of extra defense. With one final thing left to do, he took out his phone and called Yuna Shirogane. Yuna was at her apartment, dressed casually and wearing a facial mask, when Tenma's call came through. She answered, and Tenma began by saying that he needed to tell her something. That immediately caught her attention. Yuna said she was busy and considered making him wait, but when Tenma mentioned an irregular gait, her attitude changed at once. Her thoughts shifted from whatever she had been doing to the situation as an association hunter. Yuna went quiet after hearing him. The silence lasted long enough for her attempt at indifference to fall apart. Then she raised her voice and told him to repeat what he had just said. Tenma's objective was already clear: kill 1 demon and receive all the rewards from the limit break. Standing outside in the morning, he decided that his preparations were finished. He took hold of Soul Predator and set out for his demon hunt. Tenma met Yuna near the gate staging area and didn't have much time to wait before she arrived. He assured her that his information was reliable and that the dungeon itself would prove what he was saying. They were heading into an irregular D-rank gate assigned to the Roman Guild, and they would enter alongside its party. Before they reached the others, Yuna stopped Tenma to bring up one more matter. When he looked at her, she hesitated and then decided against saying it. She simply told him to keep going and hurried toward the assembled hunters. Tenma is left wondering what that was about as he jogs after her, while the Roman Guild members watch the two approaching from across the grass. The guild's party consists of D-rank hunters, Taiga Saijima and Mai Yumasaki, along with the rest of their team. Yuna introduces herself as the association representative, and Mai returns the greeting before noticing Tenma beside her. When she asks who he is, Yuna explains that he has been assigned to provide support if anything unusual happens inside the portal. Taiga, the guild master, doesn't seem particularly interested in him. After introducing himself, he tells everyone to finish the job and leave without wasting time. According to him, every monster inside is the Roman Guild's target, so Tenma should stay out of their way. Yuna accepts his terms, but Tenma can already tell that Taiga doesn't regard him as someone worth taking seriously. That attitude doesn't bother Tenma for long because he remembers what happened in the original timeline. The entire Roman Guild party standing in front of him was wiped out by the demon inside this very portal. Taiga catches him staring and turns around, asking whether he has something to say. Tenma has no reason to pick a fight before the mission even begins, so he simply says no. Taiga tells him to keep his mouth shut and follow the others, then leads the party into the purple portal. Yuna quietly complains to Tenma that this is why she dislikes dealing with guilds. They treat the Hunter Association like a competing organization instead of working alongside them. The Roman Guild party disappears through the portal, followed by Tenma and Yuna. Just before crossing over, however, Yuna stops him once again because she wants to check the portal's energy herself. She reaches toward the purple magic and reads its flow, checking whether there is anything unusual that could put the party in danger. After examining it, she finds nothing outside the normal range and asks Tenma whether he's really certain that this dungeon has a problem. Tenma simply crosses his arms with a confident smile and tells her that she'll see soon enough. Yuna still finds his claim hard to understand, but she decides to trust him and steps through the portal. The scenery on the other side is nothing like the area they left behind. A full moon hangs over a lake surrounded by a blue forest, and Yuna takes a moment to admire how beautiful the place is. Tenma doesn't let the scenery distract him. His hand stays near the hilt of his new sword because he knows the real reason they came here. Somewhere inside this forest is the Growth Demon, the creature that killed the Roman Guild in the original timeline. Before they can go much farther, a howl rings through the trees and carries across the entire forest. Taiga turns around and tells Tenma and Yuna not to stray from the group, adding that it would be troublesome if either of them got hurt while under the Roman Guild's watch. Yuna gives him a strained smile while thinking about how much of a superiority complex this D-rank hunter has, especially considering that he has no idea what is actually waiting for them. The Roman Guild members continue along the path, joking around as though this were an ordinary hunt. hunt. Tenma sees no reason to join their conversation. Hunters who rise through the early levels often start believing that getting stronger is enough to guarantee them a place at the top. They climb a few levels, see their abilities improve, and begin assuming that S rank is simply the next destination. Tenma knows that the reality is far different. Reaching S rank requires something far beyond ordinary growth, and only a handful of genuine abnormalities ever make it that far. Their conversation is cut short when one of the scouts spots movement ahead and warns the others. Several monsters are closing in on their position. A moment later, 3 silver wolves come rushing through the forest. Taiga draws his twin swords and calls out their numbers, while the frontline hunters raise their heavy weapons and form a defensive line. Mai also lifts her golden staff and casts a protection spell, covering the party with a large golden barrier. The wolves charge straight toward the group, crashing into the barrier as the hunters prepare for the fight. The squad's mage prepares her spell and announces that her ice magic missile is ready. The silver wolves keep clawing at the barrier, while Taiga stays at the front, directing the others. Once he gives the order, the mage fires a volley of ice arrows through the opening. The projectiles slam into the wolves and leave them badly wounded. With the beasts struggling on the ground, Taiga and the other hunters move in and finish them with their swords. The first wave is dealt with without much trouble. From where he is standing, Tenma can tell that this would have been an easy clear if the portal were normal. The Roman guild has enough strength to handle these monsters. The problem is that the growth demon is already changing the situation. 2 huge wolves then appear from the darkness, both surrounded by black mist. Taiga realizes at once that these aren't ordinary monsters. One of them rushes toward him, and the difference in strength is clear from the moment it moves. Taiga starts sweating and orders everyone to get back behind the barrier. He attacks the beast with both swords, trying to stop its advance, while the mage fires another set of ice arrows. The spell hits the wolf, but does nothing beyond producing a few sparks against its hide. The mage realizes her magic can't even get through its defense, and before the group can recover, the pressure from the wolf's attack starts cracking the golden barrier. The shield gives way, leaving Taiga to jump back as the beast swings its claws at him. The second wolf joins the attack and crashes into the front line. Mayumi Saki is struck by the impact and thrown backward, while Taiga tells everyone to keep their heads and hold their positions. The hunters continue fighting, even as the situation gets worse. Tenma explains to Yuna that the demon's energy is affecting the other monsters inside the portal. Once that energy spreads through them, their strength rises far beyond what their original ranks would suggest. That's what makes demons so dangerous. The Roman guild is now facing monsters that shouldn't exist at this level, and even with the hunters fighting back, they're struggling to keep them under control. Yuna asks Tenma whether they should help, since these monsters are clearly far beyond what a D-rank party should be facing. Tenma, however, activates his level 10 perception skill and tells her that they have their own problem to deal with. Blue-white energy spreads from him and scans the surrounding dark forest, revealing everything within its range. The result is worse than expected. More of the giant wolves are already moving toward them. 3 of them emerge from the trees, covered in the same black mist, and one rushes straight at Tenma. He draws his new sword, Soul Eater, and its blade lights up with blue energy. The wolf closes the distance, but Tenma's sword moves first. One diagonal slash cuts straight through the monster, and the system informs him that the experience gain is locked. Tenma looks at Soul Eater with satisfaction. The sword's cutting power is even better than he expected. Before he can do anything else, the remaining 2 wolves leap at him together. Tenma steps forward instead of backing away, ready to cut them down as well. Just then, orange chains shoot across the dungeon and wrap around both monsters. Their movements are stopped completely, leaving them pinned to the ground. Tenma looks back and finds Yuna controlling the binding magic. She tells him to finish them while they are restrained. Tenma accepts the opening, once again impressed by Yuna Shiragani's ability. Yuki Shiragani's younger sister is far more capable in both support and combat than he expected. Tenma turns back to the wolves and swings Soul Eater several times. Blue slashes cut through the restrained monsters, and a final cross-shaped strike finishes them off. Their bodies fall to the ground as Tenma lowers his sword and puts it away. Yuna can only stare at what she just witnessed, realizing that the hunter she thought was there as simple support possesses attack power on an entirely different level. Then something strange happens. Dark magical smoke rises rises from the dead wolves and begins flowing towards Soul Eater. The system panel appears in front of Tenma, informing him that Soul Eater has started absorbing the souls of the wolves he just killed. Its current soul collection has reached 13%. Yuna, however, is more concerned with the Roman guild. Their fight is going badly, with the Black Mist wolves forcing the hunters back and leaving several of them badly beaten. Taiga turns toward Tenma and finally asks him to come over and help. Tenma doesn't move. With his arms crossed, he reminds Taiga that he was the one who told him to stay away from their prey. Taiga gets angry at the response, asking how Tenma can still talk like that when they're in this situation. But before he can say much more, one of the wolves hits him and sends him flying across the ground. Blood comes from his mouth as he struggles back up. Yuna looks at the battered guild members and asks Tenma if they really aren't going to help. The Roman guild eventually manages to pull themselves together and takes a break, with everyone sitting on the ground trying to recover. Taiga tells them they should rest before continuing, but one of the armored hunters questions whether they can seriously keep hunting in their current condition. Mai Yumasaki agrees, saying there's no way they can go deeper like this. Taiga refuses to accept it. He argues that this is still only a D-rank portal and asks why everyone is acting afraid now. Then he admits the real reason he wants to continue. If they fail the raid, they won't have enough money for new equipment or to deal with the guild's debts. Tenma thinks about how hunters sometimes treat monster hunting like a game. As their levels rise, they start taking the creatures too lightly and forget that one mistake can cost them everything. Yuna steps into the argument and tells Taiga they need to retreat. The monsters inside this irregular portal have already become far stronger than their rank suggests, so continuing would be reckless. Taiga demands proof that the portal is actually abnormal and reminds her that the Roman guild is in charge of the raid. He tells her to stay out of it and follow his orders. Mai watches her guild master with concern, but before she can say anything, she starts trembling and calls out his name. She points toward the forest. Taiga turns around, and the moment he sees what is standing between the trees, the argument is forgotten. Two huge red eyes stare back at them from the darkness. A massive paw covered in black flames comes down on the ground, smashing through the rocks and sending smoke across the clearing. Then the creature steps forward. A gigantic silver wolf stands before the hunters, its body surrounded by a thick, red demonic aura. It raises its head and lets out a roar that tears through the forest. The force of it sends almost everyone flying. Hunters hit the ground one after another, while Taiga struggles to breathe after being thrown across the clearing. Tenma remains standing. With one hand resting on Soul Eater's hilt, he faces the beast and recognizes it for what it is, the boss of this portal. Another roar follows, and the system identifies the creature's battle cry. The sound inflicts a mental panic effect on the entire party, reducing their mobility while causing intense pain in their heads. Taiga begs Yuna to use her escape magic, but Tenma tells her to hold on. Yuna gathers everyone and starts preparing the teleportation, warning that she won't be able to keep the escape portal open for long. Tenma is still holding his head when another set of system notifications appears. His mindset skill has been acquired and begins leveling up, reaching level 3. The increased resistance lets him shake off the mental effect and regain control of himself. Taiga isn't so lucky. He crawls across the ground and tells everyone they have to run. Mai, lying behind him, reaches out and asks her guildmaster for help. Taiga looks at her hand, then kicks it away and runs. He leaves the rest of his guild behind without a second thought. Tenma watches him go. If Taiga gets too far away, Yuna's teleportation spell will fail, leaving everyone trapped here. Tenma turns toward the fleeing guildmaster and activates intimidation. A heavy pressure spreads through the area, and the system confirms that nearby targets have been affected by panic. Taiga's legs give out beneath him, and he falls face first onto the ground. Yuna has already created the magic circle for their escape and calls for everyone to get inside. The surviving hunters drag themselves toward it, while the giant wolf charges from behind. One of the mages is too frightened to move and gets left behind. Tenma runs back, picks him up, and carries him toward the circle as the beast closes in. The wolf lunges. Its jaws slam down on the spot where the hunters had been standing, but Yuna completes the teleportation at the same moment. The attack hits nothing but dirt, sending dust across the clearing. A moment later, the surviving hunters reappear on a distant hill far outside the beast's reach. Howls continue echoing from the forest as Mai catches her breath beside Taiga, relieved that they managed to get away. One of the hunters says they should leave the portal while they still can, but Yuna checks the teleport route and finds a problem. The exit isn't working. She looks back at the others and explains that the portal has been sealed shut. Tenma walks over and explains that this is an irregular portal, so the exit won't open until the dungeon boss is defeated. Taiga drops to his knees and asks how they're supposed to beat a monster like that. Tenma doesn't answer. He draws Soul Eater and swings it beside Taiga, who immediately covers his head, thinking Tenma is about to attack him. Instead, the slash cuts through a wolf that had approached from behind, splitting it in two. Tenma puts his sword away and tells the others not to worry because he'll deal with the boss himself. He then heads into the forest alone, leaving Taiga staring after him. A mage points toward the dead wolf and asks about the black smoke coming from its body. Dark mist starts pouring out and wraps around the corpse, twisting around it until the entire body disappears inside. The smoke gathers into a dark sphere above the ground. Tenma recognizes what is happening. The growth demon has taken control of the dungeon boss's body. Yuna asks whether Tenma really intends to fight that thing, but he says the two of them will handle it. The others aren't convinced and think taking on the creature with only two people is madness. Tenma calls Taiga over and asks to borrow his metal armor, which has a rare rating and strong defense against beasts. Yuna asks what exactly they're dealing with, and Tenma explains that the demon consumed the dungeon boss and took its form. When she asks whether he has a plan, his answer is simple. He'll beat it with brute force. Yuna jokes that it sounds like a good way for both of them to die. Tenma points out that the boss's power is what sealed the portal, so defeating it is still the only way out. Several wolves then rush toward them. Tenma moves first and cuts down the monsters as they approach, while three more charge straight at Yuna. She raises her hand and releases a lightning spell that tears through the wolves, followed by a blast that clears the area. Tenma praises the attack, and Yuna proudly mentions that she's close to being promoted to B rank. Tenma wishes he could have taken the experience from those kills, but admits that she made quick work of them. Soul Eater absorbs another soul, and its gauge reaches 100%. A system notification follows, announcing that the sword's special ability has been unlocked. Soul Release activates, covering the blade with countless spirits and greatly increasing its power. Tenma is impressed by the increase, though the system warns that the effect lasts only 5 seconds. Yuna then points ahead and warns him about the aura building in front of them. The giant silver wolf appears on top of a rocky hill beneath the moon, surrounded by dark energy. Its howl travels through the forest, and even the other wolves react to it. Yuna notices their strange behavior, so Tenma explains that they're reacting to the altered howl of the boss. He wants to move before the demon can absorb any more of the wolf's power. Yuna presses him for an explanation, saying the creature looks like a natural disaster. Tenma tells her that a growth demon has taken over the wolf's body and explains that demons possess enormous amounts of evil energy. Before they can continue, the system issues another warning. They have entered the domain of a demon servant, and a special area effect has been activated. Any living creature within a 50-meter radius is now unable to grow or evolve. Yuna asks what that restriction means, and Tenma explains that this is one of the demon's defining abilities. Their dark energy spreads across the territory they control, placing restrictions on anyone who enters. In this case, the growth lock prevents hunters from increasing their strength or awakening new skills while they remain inside the demon's domain.